wanted to point out an article, however, from Reason Magazine. This is written by Jim Epstein. It's called The Government's Appalling Campaign Against Small Bus Companies. Now, we've been talking earlier in the program about what's going on with Hobby Lobby and another small business, Conestoga. They were making some kind of wood stuff, or it was a Mennonite company. These two companies did not want to be forced to pay for abortion coverage for their employees. And they're fighting it all the way to the Supreme Court and being ridiculed every step of the way as, oh, you're corporations now, so you don't have any say-so over what goes on. Well, take a look at what they do to small companies. Now, this is a story of a small family business. It didn't get as big as Hobby Lobby. This is Jeff and Judy Rogers, a black couple in high school. They started a charter bus company called Southeastern Tours 20 years ago in Greenville, North Carolina. In '94, they partnered with her mother, took out a loan, built a garage, launched their business, and so far so good. They're doing well. They've got employees, but then the government gets involved. He says, this company was my livelihood. It's how I pay for my food and everything, but it's being shut down. Why? Because of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, a federal agency that, quite frankly, I'd not heard of before, but it exhibits all of the characteristics that you typically see with these government agencies, flexing their muscle, growing their bureaucracy, and doing it as a perfect example of a government parasite. What they did was, they never had any serious accidents at this bus company, but they did a 3-day audit, this FMCSA inspectors. They found that drivers had filled out their logs incorrectly, that Rogers had failed to provide employees with educational materials, that they allowed a former driver to get back behind the wheel before waiting for the results of his alcohol and drug test, which came back negative. Because of that paperwork, it's kind of like what we saw the other day with the school that went into shutdown and the mom was arrested because her autistic child was having some kind of a seizure. They called her. They knew her at the school. They buzzed her in, but because she didn't sign the paperwork, they put the whole school in lockdown and they arrested her. They called the police, took her away in handcuffs. These guys didn't fill out their logs, so what are they doing? They're shutting down this family business that's been there for about 20 years. It says when their troubles began in early August, they tried to do whatever they could to get back in the government's good graces, but unfortunately they couldn't. The government was determined to turn them into a failed business. Now, after 6 months, they're just shutting it down. They're being forced to dissolve their company. Where was their jury trial? Where was the legislation that gave this power? What we see over and over again is that these bureaucracies are given power to make their rules, in other words, to write their legislation. Then they have their police force that goes out, their own police force. Then they're their own jury. See, these people who created a company, a small business, shouldn't they at least have a day in court like the Sixth Amendment says? They're taking more than $25 from these people. Where's their day in court? Where do they have a jury of their peers saying that just because they didn't have the drivers sign the log in the proper way, that they should have their entire business shut down? They've never done anything to harm anybody. They've been operating without any accidents for decades, but that's the way it happens. They didn't build that. The government built that, right? He doesn't have a business. It's all about the federal government, nobody else. He's described himself as a political atheist and a citizen of the world. And so as a citizen of the world, Gerald, what do you make of what's going on to the poor people of the Ukraine?
Well, as you mentioned, it's on the cover of the TrendsJournal, and that was the winter edition, and that went to subscribers in the first week of February.
Wow.
And we actually wrote the story in the middle of January. It takes time to get published, and that's what we said, it'd be a civil war there, and Ukraine was the major issue. Well, as you mentioned, the austerity measures, number one. And as you people have done so many times and being on top of the news and ahead of the trends, you had those audio tapes and videotapes of our Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, and the ones where they're talking about the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Ukraine, whether or not you like them or not, whether or not they were corrupt or not, because they've been corrupt since the breakup of the former Soviet Union and probably before that. And then there's the other videotape of her on December 13th, 2013. This isn't ancient history. And she's at the National Press Club. And there she is standing there with a sign over her left shoulder that says Chevron. And
she ought to wear it like the NASCAR race dryers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're pimping for, the who pays them.
Yeah.
They're putting, they're anyway, in that talk, that's about 8.5 minutes, won't take much out of anyone's life to listen to. She goes on to say that, which was news to me, that Ukrainians are Europeans. I didn't know that all of them were, but she informed me that they were, and that they should join the European Union. Remember that now, this is December of 2013, and to paraphrase, but almost identical to what she said, the path for Ukrainians is to take the path set forth by the International Monetary Fund.
Yeah, yeah.
Or as it really is, it's the International Mafia Federation. and really it is, because, hey, you better pay us because we're going to steal everything from you. Mm-hmm. And that's what all this is about. It's about the privatization, and they're already starting to do that, of expensive public resources. That's the white shoe boy name, by the way, privatization. And that means selling it to your buddies at a really cheap price and getting a kickback from it. Mm-hmm. And what they're also doing is they're putting the people into the slavery that they've done already in Spain and in Greece and in Ireland and in Portugal. I mean, look what's going on. Why would anybody in their right mind want to join the EU? And why would they want to accept austerity measures, which again is another white shoe boy word for putting you into servitude for the rest of your life? Because here's the deal. As I said, you're going to sell off all your valuable public assets to our buddies. We're going to bring in the multinational banks and the multinational corporations, and we're going to rob everything that you have. And those pensions you have, forget about them. We're going to get those taken away from you too. And we're also going to raise your taxes, and it's going to cost you more to live. So now just be a good girl and boy and behave, because the International Mafia Federation has just taken over another chunk of the world.
You know, Reuters reported that as the IMF throwing the Ukraine a lifeline. It's actually a hangman's noose, isn't it? They're going to take the gas company, the big gas company that's there, as you mentioned, privatize that. They're also going to go up 50% on the energy prices of the people in the Ukraine. That's what they call an austerity program. How about?
Yeah, and again, the whole thing is a sham. I mean, look at it's an overthrow of a democratically elected government. They got this little clown in their yachts, their rabbit, that's they call him because he looks like one of these cartoon characters. And who's fronting? She's out there again, that Tymoshenko. Now she's talking about running for prime minister.
Yeah.
And some of her lovely quotes, by the way.
The Princess Leia lookalike, the one with the braided hair, right?
Yeah. Time to grab guns and kill those damn Russians. Mm-hmm. Talking about nuking them. And another one, she said, Putin represents unfiltered fascism, which was even more dangerous than Hitler's National Socialism, because he camouflaged it with phrases about friendship between people. And she said, Tymoshenko said that Putin wants to redraw the map of the world through wars, mass murder, and blood.
Wow.
Could you imagine? And this is all of the American, the senators, and they all go there and they take photographs with her, and she's in Germany with Merkel, and they're all bowing down to her. This, by the way, I've come up with a campaign slogan for 2016, and she fits part of it. You could do this in a country of your choice. Charles Manson for president. Enough of these psychopaths that are really psychopaths, and it's really in the closet, and they try to behave like normal human beings when they're really psychopaths. So I said, let's just put it out there so that we're not, don't have any illusions of who's running the show. Because because anybody that speaks these words is out of their mind. And then, if you go, of course, it's not in the U.S. media, talking about psychopaths, U.S. human rights record chastised in UN report. UN Human Rights Committee raises concerns over U.S. torture, drone strikes, the death penalty, and NSA data collection. So why pretend that Obama and Bush and Clinton and Condoleezza Rice is out there shooting her mouth off again, Rumsfeld? Why pretend that these are normal human beings when they're mentally deranged and they're psychopaths because they're in favor of killing other people under a camouflage of being normal? So I say Charles Manson for 2016.
Well, you know, they're not calling them psychopaths. They're calling them technocrats. That's what they're referring to Yachts as, comparing him to Mario Monti, the guy that Nigel Farage said, you know, who are you to come into a country where they've got a democratically elected leadership? Who are you to come in as a Goldman Sachs banker and start dictating terms to them? But that's exactly what Yachts is going to do for the State Department, for the banks that run the State Department, for the banks that run the IMF.
Exactly. They're doing it. And they're doing it everywhere. And you mean three-card Monty, of course.
That's right.
And again, you know, the Italians had...
That's a better name than Super Mario. They called him Super Mario. I like the three-card Monty. That's much better.
they had... the Italians had 3 new prime ministers. None of them have been elected.
Yeah.
Monti, Letta, and now you got Renzi over there, Fonzie, that the new joker over there. And talking about psychopaths... I love this one. Everybody loves Jimmy Carter, that nice peanut farmer, the deacon, you know, the man of God. Listen to this. This was from Al Jazeera 3 days ago. He's talking about whether or not we should supply arms to Ukrainians. He goes, I think Russia needs to be stopped at this point. I don't think we need to equivocate about the prohibition against Putin's moving military forces into other parts of eastern Ukraine. I had the same challenges to face when I was president. Now, I am going to read you the words of a sociopath and a psychopath. During Christmas week of 1979, the Soviets moved massive numbers of troops into Afghanistan, and they occupied Afghanistan, and I had to stop them from going further. So I did everything I could. I withdrew my ambassador from Moscow, not ours, my.
Yeah.
I declared a grain embargo against them. I agreed with Congress and the American Olympic Committee not going to the 1980 Summer Olympics. He keeps using the word freedom fighters. Mm-hmm. These were the Mujahideen. These were the Osama bin Ladens that we, the people, were giving money to under a big lie. As he pointed out, they did it in secret. We bought Russian weapons to give to them so we couldn't be accused of interfering in Afghanistan. This guy should be brought up on war crime charges, along with all of the rest of them.
Yeah, it's a bipartisan thing, isn't it? It's not just Jimmy Carter, it's also Ronald Reagan helping the Mujahideen, which then we now know as Al-Qaeda, giving them their start. Exactly.
And they brag about it.
Yeah.
And every word, I kept reading all those I's. I. And that's the way they all act. Whether they're the president or whether they're Kerry talking to you like this. That all we are a bunch of serfs and slaves, and they are in charge of the whole show. Like I was listening to what they did to that poor family that had that bus company.
Yeah.
And then you pick up the papers, Financial Times, headline, banks hit by $100 billion in U.S. legal settlements since crisis.
Wow.
$100 billion. Last year, by the way, the 6 major banks, they got a profit of $76 billion. But I digress. Not one head rolls. But you better fill out those logs and don't jaywalk. Yeah. You saw what they did to that girl down in your territory over there.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
Stay in line.
For the minor offenses, they shut your businesses down. They beat you up on the streets. They shoot you on the streets for minor violations. Look at the guy in Albuquerque. What was he doing? He was camping out. That's a capital offense now because, you know, I don't understand what's going on, but they get increasingly draconian. You're talking about how egotistical they are. I think a good measure of that is the executive orders. Look at how they've gone up exponentially under each president.
I know. And again, I've said this from the beginning. When it happened under Bush with too big to fail. In capitalism, there's no such thing as too big to fail.
All right.
You rise and fall on your own merits. And I said at that time, and then when Obama came in, he's communist, he's Marxist. No, it's fascist. Yes. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. You're seeing it over there right now in Ukraine. It's fascism. Fascism has taken over this country. Oh, and by the way, did you see that reception that Obama got in Brussels? After he was just over there, and he talked about how the United States is really changing its NSA and spying, and the room is filled with reporters. Everybody should try to look at this one up. It's a real good one. Barely got an applause.
My friends, we have done it. With Dr. Group's help, we have developed the ultimate male vitality supplement with 8 concentrated super herbs. This is the answer to the globalist war on male vitality with the estrogen mimickers they've added to the food and the water supply. And now our test pilot, our Chuck Yeager, Dr. Edward Group, is here to test his greatest invention. Doctor?
Thank you, Alex. I will now take 2 droppers to test this ultimate male vitality formula.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a momentous moment. Thank you, Dr. Group.
I will activate my muscles by doing push-ups.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is the move. This is unprecedented. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to see what happens right now. Oh my God! What the hell? Wait. Get out of here. Shut this down. This is not safe. This is not, hold on. Settle down. Get another doctor. Something's wrong. Something's wrong with him. Help him. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not intend for that to happen. I take it personally. Do not have those problems. Again, these are authorized herbs, well known to be safe. Please, doctor, wait a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to cut to commercial for just a moment. Cut. Get everybody out of here.
Super male vitality. It's awesome. Just not this awesome.
Oh my God! What the hell? Ladies and gentlemen, the dramatization you've just seen is just that. It is satire to illustrate in a satirical way the incredible power of super male vitality. It will not turn you into Conan the Barbarian, but it will help block some of the estrogen mimickers and reportedly let your glands produce the natural hormones your body needs. It also does have some other side effects in the human testing that we discovered, ladies and gentlemen. I'm about to illustrate right now what that is. Let's see if I can do it again. It takes some focus. Up, and away!
Start your journey to super male vitality today at InfoWarsLife.com.